Welcome everyone, this is Honest Restart, and this time we're talking about when we could get more news on the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The last time we got official news, something substantial like a trailer, was back at E3 2021. It's been over half a year since then, and the game is due out this year. Now some people will debate if it'll stay due for this year, but I think it will. We'll mention more about that in a little bit. But the point is, when could we get news on this game? If it is coming out this year, when will that happen? Well, that's what we're talking about today. Now before we jump into things, let me first very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen. You can check that all out. It is linked in the description below. And of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. So first, let's talk about the likelihood of us getting news for Breath of the Wild 2 at some point in 2022. If the game is coming out this year, there obviously has to be news for the game at some point this year, right? They need to reveal information about this game before it comes out. I think most of us can agree on that. However, there are some that believe that the game will get delayed. Why? Because there is a long history of delays with the major Zelda games. However, I've been arguing for quite some time already that Breath of the Wild 2 will not be seeing a delay because, well, I think that delay already happened. I think Nintendo was very careful about giving us any actual release timing back with their initial trailer at E3 2019 because they knew delays were possible, were likely even. So, the game technically started development sometime in 2017, we know that from interviews, but they finally showed off something of the game at E3 2019, but they didn't give us a release timing. They waited 2 whole years until E3 2021 with the second trailer to give us a release year. They've never waited that long before to give us a release timing for a Zelda game. Usually it's pretty early on. Point is, they waited this time so they wouldn't actually have to announce an official delay. And on top of that, if you take a look at all the marketing Nintendo has had lately for 2022, such as the commercials at the Game Awards or different sort of images that show their lineup for 2022, the Switch OLED trailer, even the listings during investor meetings, the game is showing up in all their 2022 marketing and discussion. So I think it's very, very likely that Breath of the Wild 2 will hold to its date, and there are rumors and things suggesting so. Even recently, Per Schneider from IGN said that he heard similar things, that Breath of the Wild 2 is lining up to make it out by the end of the year. So for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that what Nintendo told us will hold true, and the game is coming out at some point this year. So with it coming out at some point this year, there is a need for Nintendo to give us information about the game before that happens. Now typically, with most major Zelda releases, the big 3D Zelda games over the years, they come out around the holiday time, November. However, things have changed during the Switch era because Breath of the Wild came out in March of 2017. But let's keep in mind, Breath of the Wild was delayed until 2017. Nintendo actually wanted the Switch and Breath of the Wild to come out in 2016, but that just wasn't feasible, so both were slotted into an early 2017 release so they could release alongside of each other and be fully ready to go. Point is, under normal circumstances, Nintendo would have stuck with their holiday release for a major Zelda game, so I also believe that this time around, Breath of the Wild 2 is likely for a holiday release as well. Whether it's November or October, that's hard to say because Pokemon may impact things there, but at some point during that time of the year, it seems like that will be the proper time to release Breath of the Wild 2. So if it's coming out then Nintendo needs to talk about it well beforehand. Likely there will be an E3 showcase of this game and there will be a massive blowout with all sorts of details and news and information. The E3 before any major Zelda release usually showcases a whole bunch of information for that game, so definitely expect a Breath of the Wild 2 blowout at E3 this year, which will be sometime in June. That is something that has pretty much always happened, and I don't think there's really much debate there. Sure, it's possible E3 doesn't happen the way it normally does. Maybe there's a summer direct instead of an E3 direct, that's possible, but most likely we will be getting a Breath of the Wild 2 blowout in an E3 direct this June. But the question is, could we be getting news on Breath of the Wild 2 before then, or will Nintendo remain entirely quiet and silent on this game until E3? The fanboy in me wants to argue that we will be getting more news sooner than just E3. Yes, E3 will be the blowout time, but we'll get something before then. I would love to believe that, and I do actually think that that could be the case, but I just simply want to bring up that yes, I am biased and I want to see more of the game as soon as possible. But I also feel like it's fair in considering that it would be strange for Nintendo to skip a September Nintendo Direct, which they did. There was no Zelda news there. The Game Awards, where Breath of the Wild has had a major focus on in several different events in the years past, and then to have an earlier Nintendo Direct, another major Nintendo Direct, and still say nothing on the game. Basically, waiting a whole year since its last showcase to give us any information on it. It would be one thing if this was, say, just the E3 2019 trailer and there wasn't an E3 2021 trailer, and they just decided to showcase Breath of the Wild 2 now at E3 2022 because the game is coming out then. If there was nothing discussed or shown off for Zelda at E3 2021, then I could sort of see that happening. It could be a situation where they just stay entirely quiet on the game since its initial reveal, and then they have a full massive blowout and the game comes out just a few months later. Kind of like Metroid Dread, for example, or a lot of the other Nintendo games. Typically, when they're ready to fully blow out a game, that's when they do it. They don't just have one reveal, then another little mention, then wait another year, and then have the blowout. Normally, once they start to reveal information about the game, it starts to be a little consistent, save for the initial reveals for some major projects, like the sequel to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But since we got that second trailer, and since we've been seeing Breath of the Wild 2 mentioned throughout Nintendo's marketing for 2022, we've seen it in several different commercials and trailers, and a lot of their sort of social media, I do think that there's going to be a bit of a steady flow with information about this game in the coming months. Not too long ago, we did get a patent, or we saw information on patents related to Breath of the Wild 2. So we already sort of got some information, some official information potentially about the game with that. Technically, the technologies that they use in those patents don't actually have to be used in Breath of the Wild 2, but it shows that there is information about this game coming out. So I do think that the lid is coming off, and there is more news coming, and I don't think we'll have to wait all the way until E3 to do it. Which brings me back to my initial point here, that it would be strange for Nintendo, after having its second trailer, to have a major Nintendo Direct in September, say nothing, go through the Game Awards, say nothing, and then to have, say for example, a major February Nintendo Direct and say nothing again, which by the way is around the time of the Zelda anniversary, and then wait all the way until E3 to give us information about this game. I think we're gonna get something before then. If Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be the big major release for the holidays this year, I think Nintendo's gonna wanna have more of a build up to that. So I believe there is a good chance there will be a tease for Breath of the Wild 2, another one in an earlier Nintendo Direct, and then, yes, the major blowout would happen at E3. So, I'm talking about an earlier Nintendo Direct. Will there even be an earlier Nintendo Direct? I would say yes, probably, because pretty much every year we get some sort of earlier Nintendo Direct. It's usually not in January, it's usually either in February or March, but sometime in the first 3 months of this year, there's gonna be a Nintendo Direct, because that's how it always has been. And when you consider that we don't really know much about the release dates going beyond March, there is definitely a need to start talking about games and giving information about these different games soon. So I do think that there's a major Nintendo Direct coming at the very latest this March, but I'm willing to bet more likely this February. And in this Direct, they'll talk about a number of things like Kirby and Splatoon, things that we need more information on more immediately. But I also think that Nintendo's not going to go throughout an entire Direct without saying anything at all, and I feel like there's a really good chance that the second to last, or the very last announcement, will be a little tease for Breath of the Wild 2, confirming more information coming soon at E3, and maybe we get a title drop, or simply another hint as to what's going on with the game. Maybe not anything as significant as the first or second trailer, and at the very most something comparable to the trailer we got just at last year's E3. And that'll be our holdover until summertime, when we see the big full blowout, and then who knows, perhaps after that there will be a Zelda dedicated Direct between the E3 Direct and the game's release during the holidays to give us a lot more information on this game, and that way we know everything we need to know before we purchase it. But currently that's sort of my expectation on how Nintendo's going to be divulging information on this game throughout the year. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that I'm on the right track here? Or do you think we're gonna have to wait until E3 to get even a little bit of information on this game? Or do you think that maybe the game is going to get pushed and we won't be seeing it for a long while. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.